Good day. Welcome back to the Vitality Project. I'm Dr. Bob. Yesterday, we introduced a very important distinction between stress and anxiety. As we discussed yesterday, the current pandemic is obviously very stressful, but anxious rumination on it may be something actually that we can have some considerable control over. So let me ask you, how did your homework assignment go? Were you able to find this distinction, the one that we talked about yesterday? Were you able to find this in your own experience in the last day? Maybe where anxiety took over at times, which only compounded the stress you were already feeling? You see, a very important intervention is what we're talking about here, and it's just about getting clear about the difference between external stressors on the outside and internal anxiety adding thoughts on the inside. So we need to make that distinction, and making that distinction itself is an intervention. Let's make another helpful distinction today, and then we'll tie this also into another practical homework assignment for you. There's a distinction that psychology makes between good stress. This is technically called eustress, EU stress. EU is the Greek word for well or good. Good stress on the one hand, and bad stress, or what is sometimes referred to as distress, on the other hand. So think about this for a second. You heard me right. Not all stress is bad. And we're going to talk about that today and tomorrow as well. Let me give you an example. Think about your own experience these last several weeks now of quarantine. This past Friday was my 4th week inside the home, working and resting and recreating. And during this time, I, like you, we've all been stressed. But I want to ask you something. Have you yourself found at times yourself motivated to do something new or creative in terms of adapting to the quarantine situation that we're all in? Something that you might not have done before. Let me give you an example. Since I've not been able to leave home and play drums with my jazz combo here locally for the last several weeks. In fact, we had one performance that was canceled, and all of our rehearsals have been canceled. Well, you know what? I'm back to composing music here at home on my computer for the first time in several years. I've actually put up 3 albums over the last 3 or 4 weeks on SoundCloud of music that I've been working on. That would be an example of eustress, or good stress, something that threatens my creative expression, which is through drumming, and definitely the quarantine has put the kibosh on that. And I have to turn to plan B. Let me ask you something. Can you relate to this? Bad stress or distress, on the other hand, keeps me stuck in what I think of as adrenaline overdrive. And that leads to one thing and one thing only. It leads to burnout, both physically and emotionally. So that's what bad stress does. I wonder if you can begin to see the connections between yesterday's discussion of anxious thought processes and how those relate here. In distress, where we don't think creative, we get stuck, we actually barbecue in our own cortisol, which is what a client of mine years ago, a registered nurse, said to me, and I've never forgotten it. So with distress, with anxious thought processes fueling it, we get stuck in this adrenaline or cortisol overdrive, those are the 2 stress hormones. And we begin to narrow our vision. We can't think of a plan B. We get stuck. So here's today's homework assignment. I'd like you to experiment with your own experience of stress these next 24 hours and see if you can find one example of good stress and see if you can find one example of bad stress. And we'll examine both of these here tomorrow. Thank you for joining me here at the Vitality Project today. I wish you well today. Stay safe, be well, and I'll see you tomorrow.